In this video, we will show you how to replace your exhaust manifold catalytic converter assembly on this Nissan Altima. This will be mounted directly to the front of your engine. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. Safely raise and support the vehicle so you can make your way under the front. Once you've done that, there should be a plastic skid shield that makes its way across this entire area. Ours is missing, but these are typically held in place with several push clips. Remove the center of the push clips to unlock them, and then remove the outer portion. Once you have the shield out of the way, we'll continue on in this area. Now, to remove that catalytic converter manifold assembly, we will have to dislodge the lower flex pipe from it. You're going to find that you have three 14mm headed mounting nuts holding this together. Let's remove all three of those mounting nuts. Now that we have these pipes separated, let's make our way to the right front wheel. We have to remove the wheel from the vehicle so we can gain access to the serpentine belt. To remove the wheel, remove all 5 of your 21mm lug nuts, and then the wheel. With the wheel out of the way, we'll continue on to removing this plastic shield. Using a trim tool, you'll find that you have 4 push clips to remove. To remove your push clips, just carefully remove the center. We'll slide this out of position. Quick inspection. We'll set this aside. With that shield out of the way, we have a clear view of our serpentine belt and our serpentine belt tensioner up inside this area. Before you remove the serpentine belt, make sure you pay attention to the routing. Now for this tensioner, we'll be using a 17mm socket. We'll put it right on the tensioner head there, and then we'll twist this. We'll turn this clockwise to release tension. There we are. While we're holding pressure on this, we're going to carefully remove the belt from the crank pulley, which is this center pulley right out in the open. Be careful for any pinch points here. Now that we have this separated, let's make our way up into the engine compartment. To remove this area, we will have to remove this. To remove this panel, you'll find that you have several push clips holding it in place. Of course, there are different types of push clips, but generally for them, you would pull out the center to unlock it and then remove the outer portion once that's unlocked. We'll give it a quick inspection and we'll set it aside. Continue on doing the same to all. Remove this panel. We'll use a 10mm. You can remove this bolt and the same on the other side of the vehicle. Take hold of this, lift it up and out of the way. We'll set that aside. Now that we have that out of the way, let's move along to the upstream O2 sensor wire connector. Squeeze on the locking tab and separate this area. Give each end a quick inspection for corrosion. Now we'll follow the O2 sensor wiring down to where the O2 sensor connects to the exhaust manifold. We're going to have to remove that O2 sensor from the area using an O2 sensor socket. That socket has a slot for the wiring to make its way through. Put this socket in place. Let's turn this counterclockwise to remove it. Once you have that broken free, continue on to removing it from the vehicle. Now that we have this out of the vehicle, let's give it a close inspection. We want to make sure that it is still reusable. Now is the perfect time to replace it. Now that we have the O2 sensor out of the way, let's continue on to removing this shield. It's held in place with 4 10mm headed mounting bolts. There's 2 along the top, 1 on the side, and 1 all the way down across the front there. Start with the hardest one. Broke off, that's okay. We're replacing the manifold anyway. We'll continue on. Can remove the shield. Now that we have that manifold shield out of the way, we're going to continue on with removing the engine cover. This will be fairly simple. 3 10mm headed bolts holding it in place. As we lift this up, it will have 1 push clip in the center here. You're going to have to lift it up a little bit to pry it out of place. We'll set this aside. In the engine compartment, we'll remove the belt from the alternator. We can set that aside. You don't need to fully remove it from the vehicle. At this point, we're going to continue on by loosening the top mounting bolt, but fully removing the lower mounting bolt that holds the alternator in place. We'll use our 13mm for this. Start with the hardest one to get to, all the way down to the bottom here. Now, since our lower bolt is stuck in place, we'll loosen up this upper bolt so we can pivot the alternator enough to fully remove that lower bolt. This upper bolt does not have to be fully removed. Now we can take hold of the alternator, move it around a little bit, and fully remove that mounting bolt. There it is. Quick inspection. We'll set that aside. Now we'll use our 14mm with an extension. We can make our way into this area. Once you have that side off, we'll make our way to the far corner. We're going from the outside, making our way towards the inner mounting hardware. All right, here's the last one right in the center. At this point, we'll take hold of the manifold, give it a little shake, and start pulling it forward and up and out of the engine compartment. Let's get this over to the bench. Over on the bench, we'll continue by removing our protective heat shields. It's important to make sure that you install these on your brand new manifold catalytic converter assembly. For each one of these shields, you're going to find that you should have several 10mm headed mounting bolts that hold it in place. If they break, that's okay. We're replacing the catalytic converter assembly anyways. Just make sure that you install brand new bolts if that's the case. This one, our shield's broken. Typically, you would just remove that as well. We'll give that shield a quick inspection, make sure it is still reusable, and set that one aside. At this point, we'll turn this over and remove the forward shield as well. On our forward side, all of the mounting bolts are in very poor condition. Commonly for this, you could use a twisty socket to remove them. I'm just going to use a cutoff wheel. I'll cut off the heads and then remove the shield from the manifold assembly. There we are. This last bolt is already broken off. A quick inspection of that shield. We'll set that aside as well. And there it is, friend. Okay, let's prepare our brand new manifold catalytic converter assembly for installation. We need to install both of those heat shields. It's extremely important. Take the forward shield and get this in position here. Line up your mounting bolt holes. We'll start them in. We do not want to tighten any of the mounting bolts until each one of these bolts is started in. Since our shield's a little broken, I'll be using a washer for this one. Now that they're all started, we'll snug them up. Double check to make sure that's secure so it does not rattle on you while you're driving down the road. We'll turn it over and do the exact same thing to the back side. Get the shield in place. We should have a fourth mounting bolt up in this area, but our shield is damaged. Snug them up. Double check to make sure that shield's secure as well. Now that we have both of our shields fully installed on the manifold itself, we'll continue on to our 3 mounting studs that go on the bottom of the catalytic converter manifold assembly. Now to install these, you're going to want to have a pair of 10 by 125 nuts. We'll start that onto the side of the stud that has the most amount of threads. Now that I have threads showing on the opposite side, we'll continue on with a second 10 by 125 mounting nut, and we're going to bottom these out against each other. We don't want to strip the threads on the stud itself, we just want to make sure these two pieces are snug together. Once you have both of those together, we'll continue on with the installation of the stud into the manifold. We'll start this in by hand so we're sure we are not cross-threading it into the wrong position. Once you've done that, you can continue on by tightening it up. Right there is where it feels as though it bottomed out. We'll just take it a little bit further. At this point, you'd want to remove your mounting nuts from this area. To do that, you want to make sure you're holding on to the inside nut and then turn the outboard nut counterclockwise to remove that. Then you can remove the secondary nut. Double check to make sure that your stud is completely seated. Once you've done one, do the exact same thing to the other two. Let's double check these one last time and get this over to the vehicle. Now back over in the engine compartment, before we install the manifold, it's important to make sure that you remove your gasket from the engine. We'll set this aside. Once you've done that, the next thing that you want to do is make sure you clean up the mounting area where your brand new manifold catalytic converter assembly will go. When you're cleaning this, you want to be very careful not to get anything inside of any one of the engine ports. We'll use some fine sandpaper for this. Once you have the area sanded down, we'll use a rag with a little bit of solvent on it and just give it a quick wipe. We want to inspect it and make sure everything's clean and smooth on this mating surface. We'll double check inside of each one of the ports just to ensure that nothing had fallen on the inside here. These are all nice and clean. At this point, we'll pause before we put on the gasket and make our way straight down this area. Now down in this area, you'll find that I used a strap. The reason why I had to use the strap is just to hold this pipe a little bit for me. Otherwise, it's going to flex around while I try to continue on by removing the gasket. This has a circular gasket that makes its way all the way around this area. We'll have to pry it out of place. Sometimes a screwdriver or even a pick will work. We'll give this a close inspection. We can set it aside for recycling. Once you have the gasket out of the way, let's continue on to cleaning the area. You can use a small sanding disc for this or even a wire brush, whatever works best for you. It's essentially mostly around the circular area that you have to worry about because that is where the gasket will sit. At this point, we'll continue on with our gasket. Take that gasket and slide it right over the center area of the pipe there. Now we'll rest this down here. Now we can bring over our manifold. Slide it over each one of those studs. As we bring this into position, we want to make sure that we have our studs on the bottom end of the catalytic converter matched up with the pipe that we just finished cleaning down there. Start bringing this in. Of course, once we get down there, we can align it a little easier. Let's have it as close as possible. Now, as we bring this down, we're going to continue on by aligning it with the studs that go into the engine here. We don't want to damage the gasket, so take your time. Our 14mm nuts on here. These are locking nuts, so they'll only start on a little bit by hand. After that, you have to continue tightening them with your 14mm socket. The next thing we'll do is bottom out each of our mounting nuts in a very specific sequence. When you're tightening these, you need to make sure you do them in the correct order. We'll start over here, make our way to the center, and then over to this one right here. Now we're going to torque these. When you torque them, the first time around, we're going to go in the same sequence as when we had originally snugged them. We'll torque them to 23 foot-pounds. Now the second time around, we're going to torque them to 23 foot-pounds again, but this time the sequence is going to be a little bit different. Let's start up here. Now that we've made sure all of that is torqued, we'll continue on with our upstream O2 sensor. You'll find that I used a little bit of copper anti-seize along the threaded area, being extremely careful not to get anything on the sensing agent. We'll take this and start it in by hand so we're sure we are not cross-threading it into position. We'll use our O2 sensor socket to make sure this is nice and tight. Obviously, we don't want to strip the threads, but you do want to make sure the gasket is crushed a little bit. Continue on with our shield. We'll take this and get it in place. Align all of your mounting bolt holes. Start in each of your mounting bolts before you tighten any of them. Reconnecting your electrical connector. We'll press it in, listen for a click. Give that a nice tug to make sure it's completely secure. Now it's time to reinstall our alternator mounting bolt. We'll have to pivot the alternator up or down to align the mounting bolt hole. Once we've done so, we'll slide that bolt right on through, start it in by hand. Now that we have that started in, we can go ahead and bottom it out. Once you have that bottomed out, you can torque it to 18 foot-pounds. We'll do the same to the top bolt. Slide the belt over these pulleys that we can see from the top. Once we've done that, we'll make our way into the right front wheel well. Inside the wheel well, we're going to be holding pressure on that tensioner so we can slide the belt over each and every one of the pulleys as it needs to be. While holding pressure on this, we're going to double check to make sure the belt's seated. Once you feel as though it's fully seated, you can release pressure from the serpentine belt tensioner. Be careful for any pinch points. Tool out of here. Let's just double check the belt again. Let's install our protective shield. We'll get it aligned and put in all of our push pins. To put these in, you want to start in the outer portion first. Once that's slid in as far as possible, lock it in with the center. We'll reinstall the wheel, start on all 5 of our 21mm lug nuts and bottom them out. Now let's pause on the wheel here and make our way back underneath the vehicle so we can attach the lower aspect of that exhaust system. Let's attach the flex pipe to the bottom of the cat pipe here. start on all three of the mounting nuts and bottom them out. Once you have that nice and tight, we'll continue on with the plastic shield that goes across this area. Install all of the push pins into their corresponding holes. After that, we'll make our way over to torquing that right front wheel. Once you have the wheel back on the ground, torque each one of the lug nuts to 85 foot-pounds. Torqued. Let's make our way back under the hood. Let's reinstall our upper engine cover. There's this area here that will fit together. Once you've done that, we'll continue on by aligning our 3 mounting bolt holes. Let's continue on with this air intake. We'll slide it into place along here. Once you've done that, we'll align the area for our 2 10mm headed bolts. One of them is still in place over here. Now we can install our forward cover, align all of your push pin holes, and put in the push pins. We'll do these by pressing in the outer aspect, locking it in with the center. Okay friends, we've got our vehicle back together. At this point, you can hop in the passenger compartment, start up your car, run it for 5 seconds, and turn it right back off. After that, you're going to come back out here and we're going to triple check the belt. You want to ensure that it's sitting on each and every one of those pulleys as it should be. If it's off by even 1 tooth, you're going to destroy your belt. Aside from that, you can go ahead and start it up, let it run, make sure you don't have a check engine light and no exhaust leak. After that, take it for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.